All right, so today we're diving into NFTs.
Yeah.
But not the NFTs you might be thinking of.
Right.
Most people, when they hear NFT, they think about digital art.
Yeah, they think of like Bored Apes or something.
Exactly.
CryptoPunks, things like that.
But we're going beyond the digital world today.
Into the real world.
Exactly.
Bringing it into the physical.
Yeah, NFTs for physical assets.
Yeah, like using NFTs to prove you own.
To prove ownership.
Your car.
A house.
A watch.
That's right.
Anything.
We're talking about things like real estate, luxury watches, high-end cars, anything of value.
If you can think of it, you can probably tokenize it.
And for people who might not be totally familiar with NFTs, could you just give us a quick, what is an NFT? How does it work?
Okay, so an NFT stands for a non-fungible token. And basically, it's like a digital certificate of authenticity.
Okay.
It's unique. Mm-hmm. It's one of a kind. Okay. And it lives on a blockchain, which is like a...
So it can't be copied.
Yeah, exactly. It can't be copied.
Okay.
It can't be counterfeited.
Got it.
And so because it's on this blockchain, everybody can see it. Everybody knows it's real. And you can track its entire history.
Okay, so instead of having like a paper trail or like with a car, you have that like title.
Yeah, you have the pink slip, you have a piece of paper.
Right.
And that could get lost or damaged or forged.
Right.
But with an NFT, you don't have that problem.
Okay, so this is like a much more secure way to track
much more
ownership.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think when most people think about NFTs, they think about
digital art.
Digital scarcity. Right. Like there's only one of these JPEGs or whatever.
Right.
But what we're talking about is applying that same principle of scarcity and authenticity to things in the real world.
Exactly.
Like this watch I'm wearing.
Right.
This could have an NFT associated with it.
Exactly. That watch could have a digital twin on the blockchain.
So how would that work? Like how do you actually link a
That's a great
digital NFT to a physical object?
So there's a couple of ways to do that.
Okay.
One way is you can embed information about the object into the NFT itself.
Okay.
Like, let's say a serial number or a really detailed description.
Okay.
And then you can also physically tag the object with a QR code or something like that.
So like I could scan the back of my watch.
Right.
And we pull up.
And it'd pull up the NFT.
The NFT?
And you could see,
okay.
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
This watch is authentic.
So you'd know it's not a fake.
Exactly. It's not a counterfeit.
Wow.
And you could even see the entire ownership history of the watch.
So you can see everyone who's owned this before?
Exactly.
Okay.
You could see if it's ever been repaired.
Wow.
You could see if it's ever been appraised.
So it's like a
whole history.
Yeah, a whole history
of the object all in one place.
And this concept can be applied
to anything.
Yeah. Like we talked about watches, but like
cars, house,
real estate. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So in real estate, you could have the NFT represent the title deed to a house.
Okay, so instead of having a physical deed, you have a
digital deed.
A digital deed that's an NFT.
Exactly.
Wow.
And all the details about the property would be stored in the NFT.
So like
the address, the lot size, any liens or encumbrances on the property.
Okay.
All of that would be in the NFT.
And that would make transferring ownership
so much easier.
So much easier.
Because you're basically just transferring the NFT instead of having to go through all this paperwork and all these different intermediaries.
So you're cutting out...
Yeah, you're cutting out the middleman.
All the bureaucracy, the paperwork, the lawyers, all that stuff.
Right. And that could potentially save a lot of time and money.
So like I could potentially buy a house.
Yeah.
With a few clicks.
Potentially.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
It does sound amazing.
But like, are there any downsides?
There are potential downsides.
Like what?
One thing to consider is the legal framework around NFTs is still...
So the laws...
still evolving.
Aren't quite there yet.
Right.
Okay.
So while an NFT might provide proof of ownership, it might not be legally recognized as such in every jurisdiction.
So there's some gray areas.
There are definitely some gray areas.
Interesting.
So you might still need traditional legal documents and processes, especially for something like real estate.
So you're not totally replacing the old system.
It's more like a complement to the existing system.
Okay.
At least for now.
For now?
Yeah.
But eventually you could see that
potentially
changing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about
watches, real estate, cars.
Yeah. Where else is this being applied?
Oh, all sorts of places.
Okay.
The art world is a big one.
Okay.
Combating art forgery.
Right.
The luxury goods market.
Okay.
Making sure that your handbag is authentic.
Right.
The automotive industry. Cracking the history of a car.
Okay.
Making sure it hasn't been in any accidents.
Yeah.
Things like that.
So basically any industry where there's a physical object of value that could be counterfeited could benefit from this technology.
Absolutely.
I read this article recently about this NFT artwork called The Merge.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
It sold for like $92 million. But the interesting thing is it wasn't just one buyer.
Right.
Like nearly 29,000 people pooled their money.
That's right.
To buy it.
That's fractional ownership.
Fractional ownership.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is something that NFTs make a lot easier.
Way easier.
So you could own. Like a piece of a
Picasso.
A Picasso?
Yeah.
Or a rare car or something.
Exactly. A piece of real estate.
That's really cool.
It's really cool.
Because it makes
these assets much more accessible.
They're accessible, yeah.
To people who might not be able to afford to buy the whole thing.
That's a really interesting point because it's not just about
the rich getting richer.
Yeah.
It's about opening up to a wider range of people.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the potential benefits of using NFTs for physical assets.
Right.
But what about the
risks?
Yeah,
there are always risks.
What are some of the
One risk is security.
Okay.
We've all heard stories about
hacks and
scams in the crypto world.
Right.
So how can we be sure that these NFTs are really secure?
Right. Are they tamper-proof?
That's a good question, and it really depends on the blockchain that the NFT is built on. Some blockchains are more secure than others.
Right.
But in general, blockchains are designed to be very secure. They use cryptography.
Okay.
And they're distributed across a network of computers.
So it's not like hacking into a single database.
It's not like hacking into one computer.
Yeah.
You would have to hack into thousands or even millions
of computers.
Okay,
so
that's very difficult to do.
Pretty secure.
Very difficult.
But what about like the NFTs themselves?
Yeah.
Could someone like copy them or steal them?
So that's where private keys come in.
Private keys.
Yeah. Every NFT has a unique private key associated with it.
Okay.
And that private key is like a password.
Okay.
It gives you control over the NFT.
Got it.
If you lose your private key, you lose access to your NFT.
So it's really important to keep that safe.
Extremely important.
Okay.
And there are ways to store your private keys securely.
Okay.
Like using a hardware wallet or a cold storage solution.
So there are ways to mitigate those risks.
There are definitely ways to mitigate the risks.
Okay.
But it's something to be aware of.
Yeah.
You don't want to just leave your private keys lying around on your computer or on a piece of paper.
So it's like any other valuable asset. You have to take steps to protect it.
You have to protect it. Just like you would protect your house or your car.
Right.
You have to protect your NFTs.
But what about the platforms where these NFTs are?
Where they're traded.
Yeah, traded.
Yeah. What about those? So those platforms are also susceptible to hacks and security breaches.
Okay.
Just like any website or online platform.
Right.
So it's important to choose a reputable platform, one that has a good track record of security.
So you have to do your research there too.
You definitely have to do your research and make sure you're using a platform that you trust.
And the industry is getting better at this.
The industry is definitely getting better
over time.
As these platforms mature.
Yeah.
They're implementing better security measures.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So we've talked about security.
Right.
But you mentioned earlier
legal framework.
Yeah, the legal
the big one.
Landscape is still
evolving. Yeah.
So let's say I buy a house using an NFT.
Right.
Am I like legally the owner?
That's a great question. And
in every sense of the word.
The answer is it depends.
It depends.
Yeah.
On what?
It depends on the jurisdiction.
Okay.
Some countries are more progressive than others.
Okay.
In terms of recognizing blockchain-based ownership.
So in some places, it might be totally fine.
It might be totally fine.
But in other places,
you might run into problems.
You might run into some legal issue.
Legal issue.
So it's not like...
It's not a silver bullet.
Yeah. You still have to be aware.
You have to be aware
of the local laws.
The local laws and regulations?
Yeah.
in the jurisdiction where the asset is located.
Okay, so it's like...
It's a complex issue.
Yeah, it adds a layer...
It adds a layer of complexity.
Yeah. But it also seems like it has the potential to... Simplify things and make things...
In the long run.
Much more efficient.
Much more efficient.
Okay, well, this has been a really fascinating overview.
That's been a good overview.
Of this whole concept of NFTs for physical assets. And we've just scratched the surface. So in the next part, we're going to dive into...
We're going to dive deep.
Some more specific examples of how this technology is being used.
Right. We'll look at some specific companies that are doing this.
I'm excited to...
I am too.
Learn more.
Me too.
So we've talked about how NFTs can be used to represent ownership of physical assets.
Yeah.
And we've touched on a few different industries like real estate,
art,
cars,
luxury goods.
But in this part, I want to dive a little deeper into some specific examples.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
Of how this technology is actually being used in the real world.
Sounds good.
And one area that I find particularly fascinating is real estate.
Yeah, real estate is ripe for disruption.
Because traditionally, buying or selling a house...
It's a nightmare.
It's
so much paperwork.
So many different parties involved.
Lawyers, banks.
Title companies.
Inspectors. It's a long process.
It takes forever.
And it's expensive.
Yeah, it can be a real headache.
But NFTs have the potential to streamline that whole process.
Yeah, like you mentioned earlier.
Make it much more efficient.
More transparent.
Exactly.
So how would that work? Like if I wanted to buy a house... using an NFT.
Okay, so let's say you find a house you like.
Okay.
And the seller has tokenized the property.
What does that mean? Tokenize the property?
So that means they've created an NFT that represents ownership of the house.
Okay, so instead of a physical deed.
Right, instead of that piece of paper.
I get an NFT.
You get an NFT.
That proves I own the house.
That's right.
Okay.
And that NFT would contain all the important information about the property.
Like what kind of information?
Like the address, the lot size.
Okay.
Any lienons or encumbrances.
Okay.
All that stuff.
And all that's stored securely.
On the blockchain. So it can't be tampered with.
Okay, so it's a lot more secure.
Much more secure.
Than a traditional deed.
And it's easier to verify.
Okay.
Because you can just look up the NFT on the blockchain.
So anyone can see it?
Anyone can see it.
Okay.
And verify that it's authentic.
So how would the actual transaction work?
So the seller would list the NFT for sale on a marketplace.
Okay.
And you as the buyer, you would make an offer.
Okay.
And if the seller accepts your offer, you would transfer the funds. And the NFT would be transferred to you.
Just like that?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow, that sounds...
It's a lot simpler than the traditional process.
Way simpler.
A lot faster, too.
So no more escrow?
Potentially no.
No closing costs?
Potentially no.
Are there any real-world examples of this happening?
Yeah, there are companies doing this right now.
Like who?
Like Propy.
Propy.
Yeah, they're a real estate platform that uses NFTs for property transactions.
And they're actually selling houses.
They've already sold houses.
Using NFTs.
Using NFTs.
Wow, okay, so this is not just...
This is not science fiction.
This is actually happening.
It's happening right now.
Okay, but you mentioned earlier that the legal framework.
Right. The legal framework is still catching up.
It's still evolving.
Yeah.
So even though I might have this NFT that says I own the house,
right,
I might still need some of those.
You might still need some traditional paperwork.
Traditional legal documents. Yeah. Okay, so it's not a complete...
It's not a complete replacement.
Not yet.
But it's definitely a step in that direction.
Okay, and it sounds like it could potentially...
Simplify things.
Really simplify things and reduce a lot of the
friction.
The friction and the
headache.
The headache.
The cost associated with buying and selling real estate.
Oh, but what about fractional ownership?
Oh, yeah. Fractional ownership.
You mentioned that earlier.
That's another interesting application of NFTs in real estate.
So how does that work?
So let's say you and a group of friends want to buy a vacation home together. Okay. Instead of each of you trying to figure out how to own a piece of the property legally, you could create an NFT that represents ownership of the entire property, and then divide that NFT into fractions. Right. And each person in the group would receive an NFT representing their share of the property.
So it's like owning stock in a company.
It's very similar to that. But instead of owning stock in a company, you're owning a piece of a house.
Piece of a house.
Yeah.
Okay, and then if I wanted to sell my share...
You could just sell your NFT.
Just sell the NFT.
To someone else.
Okay, that's a lot easier.
Way easier than trying
to sell a fraction of a physical property?
Yeah, get all the lawyers involved and everything.
Exactly.
Okay, are there any platforms doing this right now?
Yeah, there are companies like Propachain.
Propachain.
Yeah, they're facilitating fractional ownership of real estate using NFTs.
Okay, so this is another example.
Another real-world example
of how this technology is...
It's happening right now.
Actually being implemented.
Yeah.
Okay, but what are some of the potential challenges?
So one challenge is managing the property.
Okay.
If you have multiple owners,
right,
you need to have a system in place for making decisions.
About the property.
About the property.
Okay.
Like who gets to use it when?
Right.
How are the expenses shared?
Things like that.
So you still need some kind of governance structure.
You definitely need a governance structure.
Even though it's all on the blockchain.
Yeah, the blockchain can help to facilitate that governance.
Okay.
But it doesn't solve all the problems.
Right.
You still need to have clear agreements among the owners.
Okay, are there any other challenges?
Another challenge is liquidity.
Okay, what does that mean?
So that means how easy is it to sell your share?
Oh, okay.
If you want to get out of the investment.
Okay.
You know, with traditional real estate.
Yeah.
It can take months or even years.
To sell a property.
To sell a property.
Right.
But with fractional ownership, it might be easier to sell your share. Because there are more potential buyers.
Because it's a smaller investment. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a potential benefit?
That's a potential benefit.
The fractional ownership?
Of fractional ownership.
Okay.
But it's still something to consider.
You still need to make sure...
Yeah. There's a market for those NFTs.
There is a market.
Okay, so we've talked about real estate.
Right.
Let's move on to art.
Okay, art.
Another area where NFTs are making a big impact.
Yeah, NFTs have really shaken up the art world.
Because for a long time...
Digital art
had
a really hard time.
Gaining recognition. In the traditional art market.
Right, because it was so easy to copy.
Yeah, you could just right-click save.
Exactly.
And you'd have a copy of the artwork.
Right, how do you prove that you own the original?
Right, and how do you establish... Scarcity.
Yeah.
When it's so easy to reproduce.
Right.
But NFTs solve that problem.
They do.
They create a way to...
To prove ownership?
To prove ownership.
Of a digital artwork.
And
to establish scarcity.
So now you can have...
a one-of-a-kind digital artwork.
That's just as valuable.
Potentially even more valuable.
Than a physical artwork.
Yeah.
Wow. And we've seen some really...
high-profile...
Crazy sales. In the NFT art market.
Like Beeple.
Yeah.
Every day is the first 5,000 days.
Sold for like $69 million.
At Christie's.
Yeah,
that was a big moment for the NFT art world.
So that kind of legitimized?
We definitely legitimized
the whole NFT art space.
Yeah.
Okay. But beyond the hype and the big sales,
right?
What are the actual benefits of using NFTs for art?
So one benefit is royalties. Yeah. So traditionally, when an artist sells a physical artwork, they only get paid once.
For that initial sale?
Through that initial sale.
Okay.
But with NFTs, the artist can program the artwork to pay them a royalty every time it's resold.
Oh, wow. So every time the artwork changes hands?
The artist gets a cut. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is pretty amazing.
That never happens with...
It never happened before.
Traditional art.
In the traditional art world.
So that's a huge benefit for artists.
It's a huge benefit.
Okay. Are there any other benefits?
Another benefit is provenance. Yeah. So that's basically the history of ownership. Of the artwork. And with NFTs, that provenance is all tracked on the blockchain.
So it's very transparent.
And it's immutable.
So you can't fake it.
Right. So it's a much more secure way to track the provenance of an artwork.
Good. So it's good for buyers.
It's good for buyers.
And sellers. Because it creates more trust.
It creates more trust.
In the market.
Okay. And it also helps to combat art forgery.
Right. Because you can't just
create a fake NFT
and say that it's...
and claim that it's the
original artwork.
Yeah.
Okay, so NFTs are really shaking things up.
They're shaking things up.
In the art world.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's move on to cars.
Okay, cars.
Another industry that's ripe for disruption.
Yeah, the automotive industry is really interesting.
Because just like with real estate, buying and selling cars
can be a hassle.
It can be a real pain.
A lot of paperwork.
A lot of back
and forth.
Yeah.
And there's always the risk of fraud.
Right, like odometer rollbacks.
Yeah, odometer rollbacks.
Fake titles.
All
that stuff.
It's a shady business.
Yeah, it can be.
But NFTs could help to clean it up.
Okay, how so?
So by creating an NFT for a car,
okay,
you can track its entire history.
Okay.
From the moment it rolls off the assembly line to the moment it's sold to its final owner.
So you'd have a record of every
owner.
Every owner.
Every repair.
Every accident.
Every accident.
Okay, everything.
Wow. So that would make it much harder to
commit fraud.
And it would also make it easier to
verify the value of a car.
Because you'd know exactly
what it's been through. Okay. Are there any companies doing this right now?
Yeah, there are a few companies experimenting with NFTs for cars.
Like who?
Like eLoop.
eLoop?
They're a car-sharing platform.
Okay.
And they've partnered with Peak.
Peak?
Yeah.
What do they do?
So they've tokenized a fleet of Teslas.
Okay, so people can own...
a fraction of a Tesla.
Through
an NFT.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, and so what are the benefits of that?
So one benefit is accessibility.
Okay.
So instead of having to buy an entire Tesla...
Which is expensive.
Which is very expensive. Yeah. You can just buy a piece of one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And that makes it much more affordable.
Okay. Are there any other benefits?
Another benefit is flexibility.
Okay.
So you can use the car when you need it.
Okay.
And when you're not using it, you can rent it out to other people.
And earn some income.
From your share of the Tesla.
That's really cool.
It's a pretty cool concept. Okay, so we've talked about real estate.
Art.
Cars. What else is there?
I mean, there's so many.
So many possibilities.
Yeah.
I mean, any industry that deals with physical assets could potentially benefit from this technology.
Like what else?
Like luxury goods. Yeah. How so?
So you could use an NFT to authenticate a designer handbag or a piece of jewelry.
Okay.
And that would help to combat counterfeiting.
Right, because that's a huge problem.
Huge problem in the luxury goods market.
Yeah.
And it would also give buyers peace of mind knowing that they're getting the real deal.
So I could buy a Rolex and scan the NFT and know that it's not a fake.
And know that it's authentic.
Okay.
And that it hasn't been stolen or tampered with.
So that's huge.
It's a big deal.
For that industry.
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
Supply chain management.
Okay.
So you could use NFTs to track the movement of goods from the point of origin to the point of sale.
Okay.
And that would help to improve transparency and efficiency.
Okay. And reduce waste.
Okay.
Are there any examples of that happening right now?
Yeah. There are companies using NFTs to track the provenance of food. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can scan an NFT on a package of coffee and see where the beans were grown.
Wow.
Who roasted them. How they were shipped.
Wow. So you know exactly.
You know the whole story. Of that bag of coffee.
Yeah. That's amazing.
It's pretty cool.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of different industries.
Yeah. A lot of different use cases.
For NFTs.
For physical assets.
And it seems like this technology has the potential
to really revolutionize
a
lot of different industries.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
It is exciting.
But we also need to be aware of
the potential downsides.
Yeah. What are some of the potential downsides?
So one downside is complexity.
Okay.
This technology is still pretty complex, and it can be difficult for people to understand. Right. So there's a risk of
confusion. Misinformation.
Okay. Scams.
Yeah.
So it's important to educate yourself
about this technology
before
you invest in it.
Absolutely.
Are there any other potential downsides?
Another potential downside is volatility.
Okay.
So the value of NFTs can fluctuate a lot.
Okay.
Just like the value of cryptocurrencies.
So it's a risky investment.
It can be a risky investment.
Okay.
So it's important to be aware of that.
You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
Okay. Are there any other downsides we should be aware of?
Another potential downside is environmental impact.
Okay.
So some blockchains use a lot of energy to process transactions.
Okay.
And that can have a negative impact on the environment.
So that's something to be mindful of.
Definitely something to be mindful of.
Okay.
And there are blockchains that are more energy efficient.
Okay, so it's about choosing
the right blockchain. For your needs.
Okay.
And being aware of the environmental impact.
Okay, well, this has been a really fascinating look at some of the specific
use cases
for NFTs.
Yeah.
For physical assets.
And we've talked about some of the potential benefits.
The benefits and the risks.
Yeah.
But in the next part, I want to step back.
Okay, zoom out a little bit.
Zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
The big picture.
What are the broader implications of this technology?
Yeah, that's a good question.
For society.
For the economy.
For the future.
For the future.
So stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
Reparted. All right, so we've talked about a lot of really interesting, specific use cases for NFTs with physical assets.
Yeah, across a bunch of different industries.
Exactly. But for this last part, I want to kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
The big picture.
What are the implications of this technology for the global economy? Like, if NFTs really do revolutionize how we own and trade these physical assets.
That's the big question, isn't it?
What does that even mean?
I mean, the scale of this is massive, right? We're talking about potentially trillions of dollars worth of assets that could be tokenized and traded on the blockchain.
Yeah, the numbers are mind-boggling.
They're huge.
Imagine a world where real estate transactions happen instantly and seamlessly across borders using NFTs.
Or where supply chains are totally transparent.
Yeah.
Because every step is tracked on the blockchain.
You could track a product from
the raw materials.
From the raw materials all the way to the
consumer.
To the consumer. Wow.
It could lead to a huge surge in global trade.
Right, because it just reduces so much friction.
Exactly.
And it makes things so much more efficient.
More efficient.
But couldn't this also lead to new forms of inequality?
That's a really important point.
Like, what if this technology is only accessible to
the wealthy?
To the wealthy.
Or to people who are already tech savvy.
Yeah, like what if it just ends up benefiting the people who are already at the top?
That's a valid concern. And I think it's something we need to be very mindful of as this technology develops.
Yeah, we need to make sure that the benefits of this technology are distributed fairly.
Absolutely.
And that it doesn't just exacerbate existing inequalities.
It's about inclusive innovation.
Inclusive innovation. I like that.
Yeah.
Another thing I keep thinking about is the regulatory landscape.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Governments around the world are still trying to figure out how to deal with cryptocurrencies.
Right.
NFTs add a whole other layer of complexity to that.
Because it's not just about money anymore.
Right, it's about ownership.
It's about ownership of real-world assets.
Yeah, and that has all sorts of legal and regulatory implications.
It does.
What do you think? How is this going to play out?
It's tough to say. But I think we're going to see a lot of experimentation and hopefully a lot of collaboration between governments, businesses, and the crypto community.
Yeah, I think that's key.
Yeah.
Because if we can find a way to create a regulatory framework that encourages innovation.
Right.
But also protects consumers.
And ensures stability.
I think that's the ideal scenario.
And that's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
But it's a tough balance to strike.
It is a tough balance.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about the economic implications.
The regulatory challenges.
Yeah, what about the broader societal impact of NFTs for physical assets?
Yeah, like how might this technology change the way we live and work and interact with each other?
That's what I'm really curious about.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about.
Like, imagine a world where people own fractional shares of their city's infrastructure.
Or where artists have a more direct connection with their fans.
Through tokenized art.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I mean, it could lead to new forms of community and collaboration.
Right, because people would be more directly invested in the things they care about.
Exactly.
And it could also lead to greater transparency and accountability.
Right.
Like, imagine being able to trace the origin of the food you eat.
Yeah.
Or the clothes you wear.
All the way back to the source.
All the way back to the source. Wow.
You would know exactly where everything came from.
And how it was produced.
And how it was produced.
That's amazing.
It would be a game changer.
But of course, with all these potential benefits,
right,
we also have to be mindful of the risks.
The potential downsides.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that worry you?
I'm worried about scams.
Yeah, that's a big one.
People getting tricked into buying fake NFTs.
Or investing in projects that are just pump and dumps.
Yeah, exactly like we saw with the ICO craze a few years ago.
Right.
There were a lot of people who got burned.
A lot of people lost a lot of money.
Yeah, so we need to be careful.
And need to be cautious.
And make sure that this technology doesn't just become another tool for speculation and greed.
Right. It's important to focus on the real-world applications.
Yeah, the things that can actually make a positive impact.
On people's lives.
On people's lives.
On the world.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation.
It has been fascinating.
It really feels like we're just at the beginning.
The tip of the iceberg.
Of something really big.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
I'm really excited about the potential for this technology to empower individuals.
Yeah.
to create a more decentralized and equitable world.
I love that.
But I'm also cautious about the potential for it to be misused.
Right.
Or to exacerbate existing inequalities.
So it's really up to all of us to shape the future of this technology.
Make sure it's used for good.
And to ensure that it benefits everyone.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the world of NFTs for physical assets.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been really enlightening.
Likewise.
And to all of our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in.
Thanks for listening.
We hope you found this conversation as fascinating as we did.
Yeah, we hope you learned something.
And we encourage you to keep exploring this space.
Keep learning.
Because it's evolving rapidly.
Every day.
And who knows what the future holds.
The possibilities are endless.
But one thing's for sure.
What's that?
It's going to be a wild ride.
It is definitely going to be a wild ride.
All right, that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.
See you later.